There's a trend going around CostTube right now of the costumers summing up their projects from 2020 and discussing their plans for 2021. And I thought that that sounded like a great idea because I have plans for 2021 and I'm excited to tell you what they are. But first we're gonna have to go and do the year in review because 2020 has been a pretty big year for this channel. The first thing I made in 2020 was my Basque Bodice, and I actually started this back in 2019, but I finished it in 2020. And I know that because I was working on it at the exact moment when, my notes I wrote 1029. I'm actually 1,000 years old. I was working on it at the exact moment when 2019 became 2020. And I remember because I was sulking that now 100 years ago means the 1920s. And I didn't like that. It still feels wrong to me that 100 years ago was the 1920s because that just seems so recent, but that's neither here nor there. This project was maybe a little bit beyond my skill level when I made it, so I definitely struggled with it in a few places, and there are some parts of it that now cause me to cringe a little bit when I see them. For example, I accidentally made the waist a little bit too big, and I solved this problem by having the gathered front portions overlap each other like so, instead of having them meet in the middle like they were supposed to. And if I were to have this problem now, I would have simply taken in the excess from the underarm seams, but for some reason I didn't do that. Maybe I had already put on the peplum at that point, so the underarm seams were not accessible, but if that was the case, then that was also a pretty stupid move of me to put on the peplum before I'd made sure that the waist fit correctly, but who knows? Who knows what my reasoning was? There's also this part of the hem, and I have no idea how or why I did that, but in spite of these problems, I think that it came out very well, all things considered, and I still do love to wear it, although it's currently waiting to be repaired. You can see it over my shoulder there. The next thing that I made was this petticoat, and I made this from the mock-up of a skirt that I made back in 2019. And it's good enough for government work, but it's not my favorite make. You can see by how it's all bunched and kind of puckered up by the waist that I made some sort of mistake there. Although I could probably solve that pretty easily by replacing the button closure with a drawstring, so maybe I'll do that in the future. I'm also not entirely happy with the lace flounce at the bottom. I made this before I knew where I could get more historical lace, but I don't think that I'm going to go back and bother replacing this. It would be a ton of work for something that's hardly ever going to be seen. The next thing that I made was my pen case chatelaine attachment, and I have no complaints about this. It came out exactly as I had hoped it would, so go me! And then not long after the pen case, America started to shut down for a few weeks. And I thought that this would be the perfect chance to beef up my undergarments. So I made these 2 pairs of split drawers and these 2 corset covers and also this bustle pad. Of these, only this corset cover got its own video. And I'm rather ambivalent about all of these projects. They're not great, but they are sturdy and they serve their functions well. So they're, again, good enough for government work. And can you believe at the time I was actually thinking, oh, I need to be sure to sew quickly so I can finish all of these before we start opening up again. Oh, you sweet summer child. By the time I'd finished with those, I realized that the lockdown was here to stay for the foreseeable future. So I decided that I needed an at-home dress because my, Basque Bodice, my more formal going out clothes were not cutting it for staying at home for many, many days at a time. So the tea gown project was born. And the first part of the tea gown project was making the morning corset. And this is my first time making a corset, and when you take that into consideration, I think it turned out quite well. Really, my 2 biggest complaints were not my fault. I didn't have boning, so I had to cannibalize bones from 2 of my old corsets. So that meant that some of them are not the right length, so they don't fit as well, and there are parts of around the bottom of the morning corset that kind of collapse because they're not boned. I also didn't have the greatest binding. I just had this kind of polyester binding tape. But when I was making this, we were still in very strict lockdown. It was early days still. and I either had to use what I had on hand or wait for ages for things to get shipped to me, which I didn't want to do because I wanted to get this project done relatively quickly. Once the corset was finished, it was time to start making the tea gown itself. And I absolutely love this dress. You can see I'm wearing it now, but it was also one of the most challenging things that I've ever made. Those of you who watched the video will know that I had a ton of trouble with the Watteau pleats in the back. They kept on gaping apart like so. And I eventually solved this problem by reversing them so that there was just one big pleat in the back instead of two little ones. I also had trouble with the lace because I ordered it, but due to COVID, again, it took months and months and months to arrive. I think it took maybe 3 or 4 months to arrive. But it finally did arrive, and I applied it to the Bertha collar, and doesn't it just look absolutely lovely? Next up was my formal bodice made of vintage Korean silk, and I'm super happy with this came out. It is a bit difficult to fasten the closures in the front, and it is also a bit uncomfortable. It kind of restricts movement, but I hardly ever wear it, so I don't mind. Formal clothes are not supposed to be incredibly comfortable. It's also been immortalized in oil. My mother has a friend whose husband, Thomas Kitts, is a painter, and I did some modeling for him back in 2019, and by way of payment, he offered to do my portrait. And for that, I decided to wear this bodice. After the bodice came the black wool walking skirt, and I love almost everything about this skirt. Especially I love the way that it moves when I walk. Really my only complaint is its weight. I used a very heavy thick wool, and it weighs about 12 pounds, which can start to feel a little bit heavy after a day of running hither and yon. Is it hither and yon or thither and yon? I think it's hither and yon. That skirt was followed by another skirt video. This time, though, instead of making a new skirt, I was remaking an old one. And this was the skirt for which I made the mock-up come petticoat, of which I spoke earlier. Skirt 2.0 is definitely improvement upon the first model. In fact, really the only problem with it now is that the waistband is a tiny bit too small, but it's not so small that I can't get into it, so it's not a huge issue. After that came the blue taffeta waistcoat. This project required a lot of fiddling and tweaking even after it was officially finished, but now that it is functionally finished, in addition to being officially finished, I think that it's one of the best things that I've ever made, and it fits like an absolute dream. And then last but certainly not least is the jacket. I made this with the last remaining pieces of the wool that I used for the black walking skirt, and in my personal opinion, this jacket is my greatest sewing triumph to date, and I am still much too enamored of it to be able to see any of its faults, although I'm sure it does have some. So that covers all of the sewing projects of 2020, but 2020 has also been a really big year for this channel. 2020 has seen this channel shift from being predominantly a place of discussion about various historical things with some sewing content sprinkled in, to being predominantly a sewing channel with some historical discussion content sprinkled in. 2020 has also seen this channel more than triple in size. At the beginning of 2020, there were about 400 subscribers. By the end, that number had grown to about 1,400. That said, this is still one of the smallest costume channels out there, in spite of its also being the oldest. And I've decided that 2021 is the year that that is going to change. Now, it's one of the smallest because for the longest time I did not know what I was doing. I still don't really know what I was doing, but I didn't edit some of my first videos because I didn't know how. I did not have a very good filming setup. I've only recently learned how to do voiceovers, but I'm getting better. And I've actually decided to put some money into this. I've long since said that until I am able to start making money from this channel, I'm not going to put money into it. But I have a Patreon now, and patrons are actually donating, so that means I am making money from this channel, and that money is going back into improving this channel. So thanks to the patrons, I have invested in a better filming setup, and I'm also going to be investing in some better editing software since I've just been using iMovie. So I'm using the free trials of several different editing programs to see which one I like the best, and once I've decided, then I will purchase whichever one is best. I'm also going to make an effort to post videos more regularly. I do work 7 days a week, so I can't make any promises, but I'm going to do my best to upload a video on the first of every month, and if I have time, perhaps in the middle of the month as well. Again, I make no promises, but this is what I'm going to strive to do. So, big changes in store for the future. A big thank you to Mary Royal, Kit Kat Stitch, and Sandra White for supporting this channel on Patreon. If you'd like to become a patron, there's a link in the description. If not, I completely understand. As I always say, I don't want you to donate money if you are not capable of doing so. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And please tell me below which project of 2020 was your favorite. I will see you on February 1st, but until then, bye.